Welcome to Wisdom Unlocked, The Ways of God, a production of Lion's Share, a ministry that aims to co-mission with Jesus in making disciples of all nations. We ignite and provide resources to disciple makers in the church and throughout the vocations. In our world today, there is more information available than at any time in history, but wisdom is in short supply. In this podcast, you'll hear how learning about the character and ways of God is a guide to wisdom.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to a new season of Lion's Share Leadership Group's podcast. I'm Sonia Beerson. This season, we're talking about seasons, the seasons of life. As we get older, the seasons we've lived through become clear. Sometimes it's based on age. Other times, it's based on something we've walked through. Maybe both. We must always remember that God's plans for our lives are purposeful. From birth to final breath, He calls to us, inviting us to step into the good works He prepared in advance for our lives. Through the years, He cultivates our gifts, strengthens us through challenges, teaches us through relationships, and encourages us with opportunities. No season is wasted. When we take the time to look for God's hand on our lives, we gain wisdom and appreciation for His plans. We receive perspective on who He created us to be, and we find peace at every age. Each of this season's episodes are directed to a specific age group or season of life, though all the episodes are relevant and useful whether you're considering your current circumstances, God's hand in your past, or the years to come. They may also help you as you talk to others who are in their own season, helping them understand where they are and where they might be headed next. Lion's Share Leadership Group's founder and president Dave Buehring shares this teaching.
Following 20 years of ministry and leadership, about half of which was spent in world missions and the other half pastoring local churches, I desired to round out my education and my leadership experiences by going back to school. So, while tending my marriage, raising a teenager and a preteen with my wife Cheryl, pastoring a church, and doing a little outside speaking, I attended Regent University, taking about 6 credits per semester, and over about 3.5 years earned my master's degree. It was all part of my learning and my journey. As part of this, in the late 1990s, I had the opportunity to take a 5-day modular class, went like from 9 in the morning to 5 in the afternoon, with Dr. Bobby Clinton, an author and highly respected leadership professor. I'd read his book, The Making of a Leader, and I was intrigued, while being just a few years away at that time from hitting 40, with his class on focusing on God's development process for our lives. I'll always remember when the class started. Bobby walked in, introduced himself, and then asked the 50 or 60 so of us participating to count off by 3. So around the room we went, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. He then asked all the 2s to stand. He then said to us, in my comprehensive research of over 18 years of leaders, about 1,300 of them, throughout the scriptures, history, and today, I have found that only 1 in 3 leaders finish well. Stop with me on that. Only 1 in 3 leaders finish well. Needless to say, Bobby had all of our attention. For the next 5 days, in person with Bobby, and over the following 3 months of the class, I began to discover my storyline and how God's hand was on it. From the beginning of my life, through my teenage and young adult years, right up to that moment of nearing 40. And I can tell you, I see it even more so now, several decades later. Bobby then shared with us, regardless of our current age, the value of living our lives to finish well. And he began to show us what that looked like. He also provided insights for us on both the barriers or hindrances to finishing well and the enhancements to it. And we'll get to more of that in some of our bonus material later on. One of the 5 enhancements that Bobby discovered to running our race well and finishing well was gaining a perspective of how God develops us over a lifetime. Not just in childhood, not just in college, but over a lifetime. Perspective lets us see things at a different angle. When I go to a football game and I sit in the stands up high on the sidelines, I have a certain angle that I see the game at. But when I move to the end zone, I see the game laid out a whole different way. Perspective lets us see life at different angles. This particular perspective revolves around a timeline, which includes 5 what I like to call seasons of life that reveal what God is doing in us to develop our character, our giftings, and our life purpose. You'll notice that within each season, we find a number of things. First, how God goes about shaping our character. You see, what He wants to push through us later on requires our characters to better reflect His. Secondly, how God leads us to discover and develop our gifts and skills and abilities and fulfill our life's purpose. And third, how God wants to envision and equip us to finish well. We need to understand that God develops His people differently than the world does. This is really important. When you look around the world, and living here in Franklin, Tennessee, in the Nashville area, I work a lot with artists. And I watch how artists are developed, and if I'm really honest, many of them are not developed well. They're just, what can we squeeze out of you? God doesn't develop us that way. He doesn't use us. He builds us. He's our Heavenly Father, and He develops us. While each person's life timeline, or storyline as I like to refer to it, is unique to them, there are common themes that run through God's developmental process for all of us. The timeline that we're going to be looking at is not rigid or inflexible. And just because you turn a certain age does not mean things automatically happen. However, just like our seasons of winter, spring, summer, and fall dictate temperature, moisture, nature around us, what we wear, what we can and don't do in each season, so understanding what season of life you're in allows you to better cooperate with what God is doing in and through your life. It can also help you to anticipate how you can respond to Jesus in obedience with what He might be bringing your way next. Here's what Bobby's 5 developmental stages look like. And this is just kind of a generalized timeline. When I work specifically with people on this, we build a very specific timeline to their life because they know their story. So this is a generalized one. So as we go through this and the different segments of this, just know it's generalized. So don't get locked into it, but you'll see yourself in there, all right? The first one is this. It's birth to about 18 to 25 years of age. And that's called sovereign foundations. In other words, God's doing things even though you don't know it. The cool thing is, the older you get and you look back, the more you see His hand in it. The next phase is 20s to 30s. And these are, by the way, are developmental stages, all right? So in your 20s and 30s, regardless of what you're doing, throwing touchdown passes in the NFL, planting a church in Jamaica, starting a business in Omaha, it doesn't matter what you're doing. God's doing the same thing. He's trying to develop in your 20s and 30s your character, and He gives you glimpses of your calling. It's little snapshots that let you go, oh, I'd really like to do more of this. As we move into our 40s and 50s, our unique methodologies become very clear to us, and we'll talk more about that. And our life purpose begins to be more crystallized. You hit your stride here in the next season, which is your 50s and 60s. You discover what's called your major role, the role God's dreamed about you fulfilling since before you were even born, and convergence. Bobby uses that word to say everything hits its full stride. When you get 70s-ish, and again, all this is ish, all right, 70-ish plus, you hit what is called the sage stage and the finishing well stage, where that's what you're focusing on, investing in others and finishing your life well. Let me give you a couple pictures of this biblically as we get started. First, the life of Moses. If you know anything about the life of Moses, he lived to be 120 years, and his life was built into 3 40-year segments. The first 40 years, probably the best education on the planet in Egypt. The next 40 in the wilderness, but he was given a family. And then the next 40 was when we know the most of Moses, where he was delivering the people out of Egypt. The burning bush experience happened at 80 years of age. That's where the call of God landed on his life. Now, I just want you to think about that with me. If you do the math, 80 is 2/3 of the way to 120. So Moses didn't hit his stride until 2/3 into his life. Remember that as we go through this, all right? Jesus, we see a lot about his birth, but 10/11 of his life was preparation. Like, we don't hear much at all beyond the birth, and when he's 12, getting lost from mom and dad. Could you imagine mom and dad freaking out going, "We've lost the Son of God," right? As he's 12 years of age. And so we have to realize that 10/11 of Jesus' life was preparation. And then you have Jesus' disciples, who were probably in their late teens to 30-ish. And they were caught in these first two seasons of life. Sovereign foundations, God developing their character, and them getting glimpses of their calling. And the Apostle Paul, in his late 20s and his early 30s, is when we think he was persecuting the church. And his conversion to Jesus was around 30 to 33 years of age. Then that was followed by 10 quiet years where he studied, he learned, he received input from further along followers of Jesus. Then somewhere around the 42, 43 to 49-ish years is when he's on his missionary journeys. That may spill into his 50s, where most of his 50s and into his early 60s is when he wrote 10 of his 13 letters that we have in our New Testaments today. That's his legacy. That still lives today. He was martyred at 62 years of age when the Roman Emperor Nero, say that one over. I'll just do the martyred part there. Paul was then martyred at about 62 years of age by the Roman Emperor Nero. So as you can see, God develops us through our entire lives, constantly shaping our characters to look more like and reflect Jesus, cultivating our God-given gifts and talents and skills and strengths, and building us to fulfill His purposes in and through our lives. Walking this path also allows us to become one of those three that finish well. It also allows us to advance the kingdom of Jesus through our lives and glorify His name. Now, back in 2005, I spent some time with Bobby Clinton, and I asked if I could use what he had taught me within my world where I lead, teach, disciple, and advise leaders of all ages. He generously granted me permission to do so, asking just one thing of me, that I'll always point people back to his original material. So I've been faithful to do that over these last several decades, and I will continue to do that with you now. So you can learn more about Bobby's incredible research at bobbyclinton.com. And I'd also highly encourage you to pay a visit to clintonleadership.com, where his son Richard carries on their tremendous insights on how God goes about developing his leaders. You'll also find great resources there as well. So, I want to invite you to join me on an adventure of discovery, of learning more about how God has developed you. So, if you're in that phase of life right now with what we call birth to 18 to 25. So you're that teenager, you're into your early to mid-20s, you're in that young adult kind of world. We want to talk about sovereign foundations. And I'm excited to help you see what that means and what that looks like for where you're living now. So join me and we'll get to it.
Wisdom Unlocked: The Ways of God is a production of Lionshare, a ministry that ignites and provides resources to disciple makers in the church and throughout the vocations. To learn more about what we do and how we can help you, please visit lionshare.org. You can also follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Vimeo.